Dr. Enolia, thank you so much for being here. I am beyond excited about this.
Thank you for having me, Ali. I'm so excited to be here. What a pure joy it is to be able to have this opportunity with you.
We have only everything to talk about.
Yes, we do. We do.
Something that we've talked about, the two of us, something you talk about on your channel, something that we're all seeing take place is just kind of this mass awakening on the planet right now. And I think the shamanic revival and this awakening go hand in hand. And I would just love your insight on all of this, why you think we're seeing it, what you're seeing.
So, before I even start talking about that, I think that we would have to define what the shamanic way is or what shamanism is. And many people have many different definitions. So, I'm going to define it for myself. Living shamanic Working in a shamanic way is really living in a shamanic way. And living in a shamanic way is really just about the fact that I acknowledge that everything has energy and that I want to live in balance with that energy. And living in balance with that energy is about respecting everything and everyone around us that has energy. So, in other words, I'm going to live a life of respect for all that I encounter and all that is. Now, if I take that into consideration, what's happening is that people are learning about energy. People are learning about living in balance with the earth and how important it is about respecting the things all around them because that is what allows them to exist today. We do not exist without the earth. We do not exist without the respect of the plants. We do not exist without respect to the water. So if you take all of the components that maintain our life and we go, okay, people are abusing it. If it disappears, what's going to happen? I die. Energy is taking place. Everything has energy. And we understand that people work with energetics. And people, some in the mainstream will go, oh, I don't believe in energy. But those that have finally embraced energy realize a couple of things. One, we are vibratory beings. We are vibratory beings living in a human container. So if you respect and understand and embody the fact that we are vibratory beings in a human container, then you're going to understand that your environment, that which is energy, is also going to impact you. And if you respect that energy, that which is around you is going to impact you, then you're going to respect that, oh man, maybe I need to take in consideration that when I say I'm working with energy, I'm working with everything around me. When I am out of balance, I need to come into balance. When I am disrespecting the energy in a certain way, that energy doesn't dissipate because, science will tell you that energy never dies. It only transforms or bounces back, reverberates, amplifies, whatever the case may be, right? Scientifically. So we are not ever eliminating energy. So whatever we put out comes back. It mirrors back to us. Whatever we put out is what's reverberating. So you look at all of those containers and you go, okay, so how am I living my life? What am I saying that I am reverberating out? Because that's energetics. Every statement that I make has a sacred geometry. Every sacred geometry has a code. Every code reverberates out into the universe. And what does it do? It creates the existence of my consciousness, what my consciousness navigates through, called life. And if that's the case, how am I living my life? So the great awakening is that, wow, I better learn how to live my life in balance with some respect for energy and respect for what I'm putting out there because it's coming back to me. Otherwise, maybe that's why I'm living a life that I'm not happy with. Or otherwise, maybe that why I'm living a life that's not in balance. How do I balance it out? And when people go seeking ways to bring balance or change the course of their life, and they get these teachers, and the teachers say, hey, guess what? You're an energetic being in a physical container. And the humanness that's outside of you, you're dictating your own existence. What does that mean to me? And they get this light bulb that eventually comes on that basically says, wow, I better watch what I say because I'm breathing that into existence. I better watch what I think. That's what's amplifying within my body and external to my body. I better watch what I attract because that fear that I'm amplifying is bringing it right to me. And that wake up call is a dawning. And that dawning is, well, light bulb on. So before, in a past time, I want to say that it was taboo to talk about shamanism. It was kind of taboo to talk about these quote unquote esoteric ways or esoteric ways of living or being. You know, you could study them quietly, or, oh, those are with the indigenous peoples. Are you indigenous? Are you, a tribe and dressing, we associated them with, that's those people. No, that's us. That's us. And I think that part of that comes from that we've been bombarded with how to look at ourselves separate from each other. The bottom line is, in transcendence of the humanness that tries to limit us in so many different ways, the bottom line is we are human beings. The bottom line is that we are human beings, and we are human beings that don't live in a balanced way, and we need to. So I think that what's taking place is our wake-up call is here. Our wake-up call of what mirrored back to us is saying, you better look up, because all of those biases and differences and everything that you defined of your way of being doesn't mean anything here. It doesn't mean anything when you get a tidal wave, right? People die. It doesn't mean anything when an earthquake happens, because the earth opens up and it swallows you, right? So our culture has been masterful at differentiating how we should see ourselves differently. But I also believe that the wake-up call is helping us to see how we are all the same, how we are all one. So when we talk about that, shamanistic practice is kind of revitalizing and coming back and everything else. Really what we're basically saying is that great awakening is finally taking place. And in its taking place, we start seeing each other in humanness. And in that humanness, that beauty of who we are, what we can embody, and what we can create is powerful. And I love every moment of it.
Let's talk about how you kind of got into living this way, because it wasn't always the case. You're currently in Africa, but you were in the US for a long time before that, and you were in the corporate world and all of that.
Here we are, we all go into corporate and we want to climb the corporate ladder, and we're excited, and we have this career, and the career is going, and things are happening, and things are going, and we're happy, and we're excited, and then you're there for a while and you're hoping to grow, and you're there for a while, and then you hit a wall. And if you don't know what that wall is, let me express it to you. It is the good old boy network says you're not growing anymore and you're not going any further. And there you are, the walls have it. And I started stepping back and looking at my life. Each one of us hits a precipice in our life when we go, how did I get here? Why am I here? And what good is this serving me? And what do I long for? And most of us won't change anything. We're scared to, because we've been in it so long, we don't know what else to do outside of quitting. And quitting's scary because we're addicted by that time. We're addicted to the lifestyle. We're addicted to the money. And I don't call it just we're used to making, we're addicted. And that addiction is what is fed to us to keep us in place. And when that hit me, and I was like, well, where is it that I'm going to draw from? What is it that's missing for me? And as an African American in the United States who lost my traditions and everything else because of the way we were brought here into the United States, you know, so I have my parents, but I couldn't tell you who my grandparents were or where they came from, you know, because of the transatlantic slave trade. And I wanted my rites of passage and what are my traditions? What is it that makes me the foundation and the value of me? What is it that gives me strength that I can look back at my past and basically say, well, I went through this initiation, this rite of passage, I'm stronger, I'm better, you know. You know, it's the like the Jewish tradition, they have the bar mitzvah and the bat mitzvah, right? You have this rite of passage, this initiation that celebrates you for who you are as a woman or as a young man. And I was missing that. How do I get that? But I also knew that I was part Cherokee. And I was like, okay, so I can't find the African traditions. Let me take a look at the Native traditions because at this point, I just wanted tradition. And, you know, that was the first seed. So a couple of things different happened. I had a beautiful woman who was a medium when I went to Angelica, New York to hang out with the wives. You know, we were just like corporate wives, getting a break, hanging out, going antiquing and everything else. And we went to see this medium and her name was Janine. And, you know, didn't know anything about it. I didn't know what mediumship was. It was like, what is that stuff? You know, I was one of them. What is that stuff? Esoteric stuff, that new age stuff. And when this woman, I asked a woman to take a picture of the group. It was like 20 of us together. I mean, this is how big the group was, 20 women together. Wow. And she took a picture of us. And then this woman wouldn't take her eyes off of me all night long. It's like, what the heck? Why is this woman staring at me? From the moment I asked her to take a picture, she just started staring at me. And then, you know, we're eating dinner and I'm like, Jenny, do you see her? She's staring at me. Yeah, she's staring at you. What the heck? Do you know? And she just looking. And then the owner of the bed and breakfast goes, okay, and now we're going to have our medium. And it's the woman who took the picture. Her name was introduced as Janine. And she's introducing herself, but she's still staring at me. And I'm like, oh my God, does this woman realize she's staring at me through her introduction? And you think that I'm going crazy, but then she finally said it. She said, okay, that's it. And we're all looking at her and she goes, I know I've been staring at you the whole time. You have an entourage around you and they will not let me take my eyes off you. I'm doing you first. And I'm like mortified, right? Because all of this attention's on me, the whole room full of people. And what does this mean that she's going to do me first? What the heck is that? So she comes over to my chair. She adjusts my chair. She stands behind me. She puts her hands on my shoulders behind the chair. And she proceeds to tell me about my mother's sisters, how they're all around me, that I'm not open enough, that to keep my music, to keep my artistry, to keep my singing, and a plethora of other things that I'm supposed to do that were so intimate of knowing that it could only be my mother and her sisters, you know?
Yes.
And I'm like, oh my goodness. And that's where it began. Then I was like, no way. I was so dumbfounded for the rest of the evening. For the rest of the time there, when I got home, I told my husband at that time all about it. And I started reading voraciously. Who's your spirit guide? What is an aura? What is an out-of-body experience? You know, anything I could get my hands on. And then I started praying and I was like, okay, Creator, you got to give me a teacher. And I remember my very first teacher. She was a medium local. You know, I lived in upstate New York in Corning, New York. Where the heck are you going to find somebody in Corning, New York? But I did. I found one person and she introduced me to a little bit more. And then I found another person and she introduced me to a little bit more, and another person that introduced me to a little bit more. And I'm reading, reading, reading. Okay, I got a whole bunch of books under my belt. And then I learned about the 13 indigenous grandmothers. And I went up to Rhinebeck, New York, and I'm like, I'm going to have this weekend that was gifted to me as a Mother's Day present from my boys and my now ex-husband. And I go there for the weekend and I'm like, I am not walking away from this weekend until I get a teacher. And the 13 indigenous acknowledged this woman who was out in the audience when they were on stage. And this woman stood there with this beautiful serpent staff and her white buckskin dress, gorgeous gray hair, native. And they're calling her grandmother. And I learned that grandmother meant medicine woman and grandfather meant medicine man. And I spied her and I'm like, that's it. She's the one. Mm-hmm. So they let us out of the auditorium and I'm busting my butt to get out there to her. And then I finally get to her and I'm like, grandmother, I would love to learn from you. Could you? And she goes, oh, my girl, so nice to meet you. And I introduce myself and she introduces herself and she goes, well, what is it that you want to learn? And I was like, I hadn't even thought about what it is I want to learn. I just knew that I wanted to talk to her. And I'm thinking really quickly, I'm like, herbs. Okay, will you teach me herbalism? Well, my girl, okay, that's a handful, but yeah, that's a possibility. Here's my card. Come up and see me sometime if you're really serious. And I said, don't invite me because I'll show up. 2 months later, I drove 22 hours, Northern Ontario, 100 miles shy where there's no more roads, to Serpent River Reservation of the Ojibwe Nation. And I met grandmother Isabel, stayed with her a weekend. We hit it off beautifully, beautiful energy back and forth. And she said she'd be willing to teach me, but she's having a retreat the following year and just bring some women. And do I want to participate in organizing the retreat? And I was like, I'd love to. I'm a project manager. How hard could that be? And so the following year, I brought 22 women and I got there a week early. And I was going to learn from this grandmother. And she started something that I didn't know would change the course of my life, which is that she saw something within me. And I actually write about this in my book, Finding My Sovereign Voice with My Grandmother Elder. It's all about my time with her in the 2 weeks during that, the week before the retreat and the week during the retreat, that she set the tone of being taught by a string of grandmothers and grandfathers across the world that I would never, ever, ever think were possible. She was the first. And come full circle to come back to her and then have her initiate me as a grandmother equal to her elder, but a grandmother of the world, because my community is the world. From grandmother Isabel of the Ojibwe, I met grandmother Shirley of the Lakota. I met grandmother Maria Resaburu of the Apache. I met grandfather Lynch Archuleta of the Yaqui Indians in Arizona, who taught me desert intensives. I spent time with the Quiros Indians of Peru. And I met Doña Bernardina, who is no longer living, God bless her, who told me that I would be a shaman before I even understood what a shaman was. And it gave me my first stone for my mesa before I understood what a mesa was. And then from her, I come back to the States. I met the Wayataha and working with Chief Tipuraha, but the grandmothers of the Wayataha. And then going back to the first time I went to South Africa looking for the shamans in Africa, and going to South Africa and working with the Sangomas in South Africa. And then coming back to Angola and being initiated under the Ovumbundu tribe. And it just set off this whole string that changed the course of my whole life. Circling back to grandmother Isabel, and actually circling back to Omega. I watched these 13 women pray from their cultures and their ways. And I could feel it all the way into the base of my gut,
Mm.
physically feel their prayers, physically feel how they were changing the energy around me, and physically had to acknowledge that this was real. This is no joke, that there is a resonance in certain words that we utter. And if all of those words are uttered, then we physically can change the energy around us. And if we can physically change the energy around us, what is it we can do? We did not come here as human beings to play small. But that if I took the time to study, acknowledge, and participate in that which makes me stronger and that which celebrates me through initiations, through studies, through acknowledgement, through the embodiment, that I could be grand. And I'm not talking about an egotistical grand, but a grand of harnessing and understanding the I am presence within me.
Mm.
And that there are many roads to that one understanding. And it doesn't matter which road you travel to get there, but the
Mm.
respect and the acknowledgement that all roads may be different, but they are to be respected, and they do accomplish the same thing.
So let's go back to your retreat and talk to us about some of the things that happened there. I've heard you speak about this before, and there's some interesting experiences you had and some big lessons that you learned.
I learned so many lessons during that retreat. It wasn't funny. And the reason why is because I was corporate. I knew nothing about indigenous culture. So I knew nothing about what the Ojibwe was doing, all the way down to, like, I helped plan this retreat, and I worked with one of my dear friends. Her name's Ellie. God bless her. She's passed away at this time now. But Ellie and I worked with Grandmother Isabel to create, well, actually, we didn't even work with Grandmother Isabel. Ellie and I planned the retreat and then said, Grandmother Isabel, it's done. Here it is, right? And so I didn't know that we turned the retreat over to Grandmother Isabel. So when it was time for the retreat to kick off, I'm like, come on, Ellie, it's time for the retreat to kick off. And I'm thinking, we set the tone, like I would in corporate, of the agenda and everything else that's going on. And then, then we just let it go, or we have to moderate what goes through, I'm standard stuff, right? No biggie. And Ellie's like, no, I'm not going. Well, what do you mean you're not going? I'm going to take care of this over here. What? But it's about to start. And she goes. She's just gone. So I go and I'm like, oh God, she's not even going there. She's leaving them hanging. Okay, I'll go. So I went, and they were all gathered around, Grandmother Isabel, her right hand Sandy, and the women who were attending and whatnot. And I get there and I'm like, hi everybody, and I know you've been waiting. I'm sorry. So here's the agenda, and I started just like a typical corporate meeting. And then, I'm talking and everybody's looking, they're listening and everything. And they're like, okay, okay, okay. And then Sandy goes, hey, you know what? Can we just take a 5-minute break? And I'm like, yeah. And I had to go to the bathroom anyway. So I run over to the house, I run to the bathroom. I'm coming out and Sandy catches me and she corners me. And I'm like looking at what's going on. She goes, do you think you're running this meeting? Do you think you're running this retreat? And I'm like, no. She said, in all my years of attending retreats with Grandmother Isabel, I have never, ever experienced anything like this. Anything like what? Do you think you're in charge? And then it hit me. It hit me that I had been so motivated by my corporate ways of taking what's mine and stepping into the leadership and just grabbing it, that I had insulted the very person that I came to learn from. And the tears started down my eyes, and I'm
Mm.
like, no, I don't want to be in charge. And I blah, blah, blah. And she goes, and she looks at me and she sees the tears streaming. And she goes, okay, so you don't want to be in charge. I'm like, no. And then she goes, okay, well, clean your face up and then come back over. And she walks over, and now I'm feeling low. Now I'm feeling like the epitome of low. And I walk over and I'm kind of sulking and my head's down, and I'm like, I I insulted the very person I wanted to learn from. They're going to amplify this mistake that I made and whatnot. And I stand in a circle and she whispers in my ear, because I stand right next to Sandy. She whispers in my ear quietly, hold your head up. And I looked at her. And so I held my head up, and their grandmother Isabel had taken over at this time, and she's talking and whatnot. And then grandmother Isabel makes a motion for me to come stand next to her. And so I exit where I was in the circle and I go on the outside and come next to her. And then she holds my hand and she talks and she says the most beautiful things. And then she opens up with the four directions holding my hand. And it was at that moment I learned compassionate leadership.
Mm.
Nobody knew I had made a mistake except me. That was the realization that I had. They never said a word. They never said corrected it. They didn't throw me under the bus like corporate would do, or amplify the mistake I did like corporate would do to make sure that nobody else makes it, and that she kept me by her side the whole time with this beautiful energy as if nothing ever happened. Talk about inserting foot in mouth. First time. Another big thing, I'll never forget the barn. So again, arrogance, corporate arrogance. I wanted to meditate in this barn, and I went in the barn. It's the middle of the day. It's a beautiful day, and I'm having this beautiful meditation. And I see where the barn was, and I see workers working in the barn, and I see this whole dynamic happening in the barn in my meditation, and I'm like, oh, good. I'm gonna continue this later on this evening. I want to pick up from where my meditation left off, right? And so, I go and I have dinner and everything else. And, I'm like, hey, grandmother Isabel, I'm going to go in the barn a little bit. She's like, sure, and me mentioning it, thinking that that's permission to go in the barn, to think that I could do what I want to do. So I decided that I was going to open up the four directions in the barn. Like grandmother Isabel, how hard could it be? It's just a few words, like open it up. So I light these four candles. I'm in the barn and it's dark. And you have to understand that this barn is probably 40 to 50 feet high. It was one of those barns that had 4 or 5 tiers of how they did hay. And so if the barn was stacked with hay, you'd be on tier 5, which was at the very top of the roof, to shovel the hay out of the window. And then there was the next level down once the hay went down, and the next level down. And then so it was huge. And it was an 1800s barn. And so I'm in there and it's pitch black. And the only thing that you could see is a little bit of the moon going through the slits of the wood that held the barn together. Otherwise, it's pitch black. But I had my candles, no big deal. So I'm there and I'm like, okay. And I kind of figured out which is north, south, east, and west. And I go to the east, and you always start in the east with the eastern tribes. And I stand in the east and I say what I think grandmother Isabel would have said. And I go in the south and then the west and then the north, and I say it, and then to the mother and to creator, and I open up the gates and I welcome the spirits to come in. And then I feel like this pain right here in my throat. And I'm like, oh, that's odd. And so, I'm engaging and I'm talking, finishing up the spirits, and I'm welcoming the spirits. And then I feel this like somebody's grabbing me, and I'm like, what the heck? And then I realize I'm wheezing. And then I realize I'm choking. And I'm looking around and I'm like, but there's nobody here and I'm choking. I didn't eat anything. I'm choking. And then I'm realizing that I'm feeling squeezed. And I looked down and the candles went out. What did I do? I opened up a portal and they all came. And I didn't realize that all of these spirits, whatever the spirits this land was holding, was so grand and so many that they were crowding in that barn and they were squeezing me out and I couldn't breathe. And then I literally consciously had to go, turn around and leave or you're going to die. And I'm going, And I run out the barn. I run out of the barn and I'm going, and I get to the night air and I go down to the entrance of the barn and I finally hit the grass. And when I finally hit the grass, I could actually start getting some breath back. And
Wow.
that's when it dawned on me, coach, this stuff is real. You know it's real, but you don't know it's real. You go, yeah, 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 yeah. It's real, energy. Physically feeling it. Holy crap.
Mm.
This is real. And I messed with the wrong stuff. And the big, rude lesson learned is I will not do things before I am told and understand what I am doing.
Did you talk to anyone at the retreat about that?
I talked to grandmother Isabel about it. And she says, well, my girl, you opened it up and they came. And that's when I realized it was squeezing. She said, well, you
Wow.
opened it up, they came. She said, you really shouldn't have been opening anything up until you understand what you're doing.
Wow. Wow. And that does come up on this podcast a lot. Be careful what you ask for, be careful what you
Because
call in. Yeah, because it comes.
it comes. And that's when I realized they were squeezing me out. That's when I realized that, um, how serious it was to respect what people do in ritual. So I had somebody go, oh, by the way, grandmother Enolia, will you give me the 4 directions the way you open it up? And I'm like, nope. We don't want have people have instances like that, because I truly believe that I would have lost my life in that barn had I not ran out. Each of us goes through a leap of octave. And that leap of octave is that something so fundamentally changes the course of our life that we're at the next level. So my first leap of octave, I would say, was meeting grandmother Isabel. And, I was traversing the United States, still doing my corporate thing. And then I wanted to be taught very, very seriously. And when I approached grandmother Isabel about being taught by her, she was like, okay, that's wonderful. I'd love to teach you. You're going to have to co-locate here. You'll have to stay with me for the next 2.5 years. And we welcome you and your family, and we'll move your family here. And I was just like, oh, I can't do that. My husband at the time would not go for that. The kids were in their teens. They're not going to go for that. So that doesn't work. So I ended up staying and looking for a way to learn, but still, keep my family intact. And that's when I found the Four Winds Society, Alberto Vialdo, and being able to go to his classes and do a 2 week submersion and intensive in the 4 directions. And he had his classes. There were 7 classes you had to complete, and it would take you 2.5 years to complete them because they were only offered every 6 months. And then what you do is you took them for 2 weeks, and then you practice for 6 months, and then you took them for 2 weeks, and then you practice what you learned for 6 months, and you went around the medicine wheel. So there were 4 base classes that you had to take: the north, the south, the east, the west, except they started in the south because it's the Quiros Indians of Peru, is based on their traditions. And then you had to take 3 advanced classes, and then you were a practitioner because you had practiced the duration of traversing those classes. I can't account for what they do online now because they produce online classes now. That's different. But when I went, that's how it was conducted. And that's when I met Doña Bernardina in the South. I actually went to a trip with the Four Winds Society to Peru before I even started the classes.
Wow.
And that in and of itself was an experience, because
Mm.
I felt so called.
Mm.
I felt like I was going through iterations that opened up a whole new world to me. And I was watching these people who were already in the Four Winds Society, who called themselves shamans, and I'm like asking 50 questions. Well, what does that mean? Well, what is a mesa? Well, why are you opening it? Does the cloth mean anything? I'm like asking question. Why are you wearing that poncho? Why is it black? Why are the Quiros Indians only wearing pink? Blah 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 blah. I'm asking this plethora of questions, and then I decided, okay, this is the way that I want to go. This is how I'm going to learn energy work. This is how I'm going to take that next leap forward. And so I start going. And so, as I'm going and as I'm learning, it was when I was in my 3 advanced classes, and I took my last 3 advanced classes in California. And in California, while I was doing it, I knew that I wanted to honor the fact that my life was changing. I was going through a divorce. I needed a place to live. I didn't know where I was going to live. All of these huge, 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 huge life decisions that I needed to make. And I'm going to equate it to coming through a birth canal, because we each have a decision, and Creator gave me a decision just like He gives each of us a decision. And the decision in my lifetime was, do I stay married or do I get a divorce? And if I stay married, what is the course of my life going to look like? And if I get a divorce, what's the course of my life going to look like? How do I reset? How do I start all over again? How do I go to being alone all over again after raising 2 beautiful boys? And I didn't hate my ex-husband.
Mm-hmm.
We never said a bad word between us. So all of those decisions came, and as I called going and navigating that scenario, I called that going through the birth canal. And by this time, the disconnect was that I started living this spiritual life, not just understanding it. I started living it, and it changed me, because it changed me down to the core of my being. It changed where and how I was as a human being. And that attraction that initially attracted the relationship I was in was no longer there. But instead of using that as a justification to place blame, we just agreed in a beautiful way that he deserves to be happy, I deserve to be happy, but we just weren't making each other happy. And it was okay that he deserves happiness and I deserve happiness. And we just agreed. And that was beautiful. And so I picked up from New York, and upstate New York, and I went to California. And by this time, our oldest was living his life and had graduated and was on, doing his own thing. And our youngest was living his life and only had a couple of years to go in college. And so they had their course of their lives, and it was just the 2 of us. So we made this agreement and this respectful contract to say that if anyone needs help, either of us, we would be there. But we both deserved happiness.
Wow.
And so to me, when that agreement was made, I finally came out of the birth canal to come and to see something new, and that was California. And that was, okay, I now understand how to be as a shaman and live in a shamanistic way. I had a huge respect for water, for earth, for air, for all of the things I'm living in. I was looking at things a completely different way than I had ever looked at them before. I couldn't live the corporate life anymore. It was no longer in my vibratory being. And what finalized that was a 100-mile walk across Kenya, walking the east and west Tsavo parks of Kenya, led by the Maasai. 10 miles a day, 10 days in a row. I did this 100-mile walk with them. It took me in such deep contemplation. When I came back to my corporate job on Monday, I was so in a different place. I quit by Friday. I was doing my last day. I couldn't do it anymore. It wasn't me anymore. So that was the next leap of octave. That was the precipice. And so each of us reaches these precipices in life, and our heart desires something else to do. And we either embrace it or ignore it. We either embody the embracement, okay? And then the world of formation, we formulate how we're going to take that action step, then we close our eyes and we leap. And then when we leap, then we are. And we go, okay, now how do I just exist and be in this new world that I've just created for myself? And that's what California was for me.
So when I'm trying to piece together when you had gotten sick, you had found a lump. I believe it was a lump in your lymph nodes, is that right?
That's correct. Oh my gosh, yes. So that happened before California. That was it. That happened. Well, it happened 1 year before California. So here's the deal. I'm going to the Four Winds. I'm learning about all of this energy stuff. I'm maintaining my corporate career, and here I am. My back is killing me, and I go to a chiropractor, and I was so checked out of my body. The chiropractor's adjusting me, and he goes to put his hands on my neck and adjust my neck. And he goes, "Do you know you have a lump in your neck?" And I'm like, "No, you know." And he's like, "Yeah, you do." And he goes, "Feel right here." And I go, "Oh, wow, yeah, I do." He goes, "You need to get that checked out." And I said, "Yeah, I will." "No, I don't think you're hearing me. You really need to go get that checked out, and you need to go get it checked out right away." So, I didn't even go to my doctor. I went to my physician's assistant. It's like, okay, yeah. I'll get it checked out. And I go to the PA, and she goes, Enolia, I'm going to refer you to a neurosurgeon. A neurosurgeon? What the heck for? She says, this is a little bit serious. I'm going to let the neurosurgeon talk to you. Okay. So I get to a neurosurgeon, and he basically goes to me, "Oh yeah, you have a lump, here, and what we should do is we can get an ultrasound." "Well, what is it?" "Well, let's just take the ultrasound." "Right. We'll do the ultrasound, and then you come back and we'll discuss what it is, what the course of action should be, blah 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 blah. Just go get an ultrasound first, and let's just see." So I go and I get the ultrasound, but of course, in our beautiful medical system, couldn't get back into the doctor, right? So I call him, like, "I can't get back in, and you told me to come right back to see what this is." He goes, "Oh, the nurse talks to him, and his word back to me was, schedule the appointment when I'm available, but take a second ultrasound and we'll see if it's gotten increased in size or not." So I schedule a second ultrasound, and it kind of pissed me off that the doctor wouldn't see me right away to give me my results. So I went to a different neurosurgeon. I'm like, if he can't take the time to see me, I'll just go to a different one. So I go to a different neurosurgeon, and I finally get in his office, and he goes, "Oh, well, yeah, it's increased in size by X. And you know what? I can cut it out surgically for you." And I got angry. I got so angry. I said, "You know what? I've been here 3 minutes. You said hello. You said my name. You said, how am I doing?" And then you said, "You can cut into my neck." And you never
Mhm.
told me what the hell this was. You didn't sit down. You didn't find any background about me. You don't know who I am. And you just told me you can cut into my neck. I was so angry. I was so angry. What the heck is it that you're telling me that you can cut out of my neck? And I actually literally had to say that. And he's like, "Oh, it's your lymph node." He said, "But we can wait till it's hard, because when it's hard, it's cancerous and it's easier to cut out." Well, when it's hard, it's easier to cut out. And then I said to him, "Does that mean it would be cancerous?" "Well, we would just have to check it out and take a look at it at that time." I was furious. I'm like, "I'm out of here." And I literally left, and I was in tears. And I'll never forget that when I went home, I had this appointment with a dear friend of mine. Her name was Shaw Roberts, aromatherapist. And I was making body butters and stuff. And she was there to help me solidify my ingredients, my products, as a certified aromatherapist. And she arrives at my house, and she could tell I'm off. "What's wrong?" And I explained to her the whole thing, and she's like, "Hey, I don't know if this will help, but I saw this Chinese medicine doctor. She's seventh generation, and she might be able to help. I can't guarantee anything, but you should go check her out." So I go. This woman's office made me fill out a 20-page intake sheet. I loved that right off the bat. She wanted to know all about who I was. Then when I went to the appointment, she spent 2 hours with me. That's unheard of. 2 hours with me, finding out who I was, blah, 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 going over the complete intake sheet. And then she said, come back in 2 days and I'll tell you if I will accept you as a patient. So I came back in 2 days and she sits me down and she says, listen, your lymphatic system is completely, this is your lymph node. And the left side of your body, the lymphatic system is completely inflamed. That's why you're having pain. And your lymphatic system is shutting down. She said, I'll be willing to take you on as a patient, but you have to promise me certain things. You have to change your diet, you have to exercise, and you have to come see me twice a week, every week, no excuses. None. This is in February before I left the corporate job. And I'm like, hey, but by the way, in September, I'm going to Africa. Do you think we can have this all wrapped up? Because I'm going to be in a walking safari in Africa, and I get to walk 100 miles in Africa with the Maasai. And she's like, I don't think you understand how serious this is. I said, oh, yeah, I know how serious it is, but I'm going. She's like, no, you're not. I go, oh, yes, I am. She goes, no, you're not. Not if you're serious. I said, I'm serious and I am going. I said, I'll make you a deal. And I'm saying this to the doctor. If I will wait until 1 month before I go. If you say I can't go on this trip, I won't go. But if you say I can, and I've met all your criteria, I'm going on this safari. So we turn around and I'm going. And so what people don't know about me is I have huge self-discipline. So my rule was there has to be food in my food. If it wasn't grown from a plant and identifiable from a plant, then it didn't enter my mouth. I cut out all refined sugar, no dairy, and there had to be food in my food, no processed food. And then I went to a friend of mine who was an herbalist, and she strengthened my kidney, adrenals, and liver. Everything she gave me, every concoction, I would go to her twice a week. Every week, she would strengthen my kidneys, liver, and adrenals. That was her goal, to give me things that would strengthen that. And she did it by plants, okay, and teas and things like that. And then I practiced walking because I was supposed to be walking with the Maasai. So a month comes right before. And I'm like, okay, Dr. Wong, can I go on this trip? And she goes, sit down. And I'm like, oh God, here it goes. She's going to tell me I can't go. And she starts it off and I'm thinking she's getting ready to tell me I can't go. She goes, if anybody would have ever told me that they thought that they could resolve certain issues like this as seriously as sick as you are, within the length of time that you did, I call them a liar. And I'm like, okay, she's about to drop the ball on me. She goes, you are like at 85%. You go, you have and enjoy your trip, and you come back and we finish it up. And wow. I never got surgery on my neck, ever. I did the whole thing holistically, and I did the whole thing with the discipline of eating, the exercise, the strengthening of the adrenals, liver, and kidneys. And I resolved this, and I went and I walked 100 miles, 10 miles a day, 10 days in a row with David Pramal and company. It was my pilgrimage. Like, I knew them, but I didn't know them well. So I could have my off time and not have to worry about, am I being kind or, antisocial. They knew I was kind of like on my own pilgrimage, kind of trying to deep dive into my own heart. And that's when I came back on Monday and I was like, I can't do this anymore. And I left by Friday to corporate. But It's funny just to backtrack that. I was at a women's retreat and I met this, I was at Marcella Lobos's women's retreat from the Four Winds, because that's Alberto's wife. And she had introduced us to grandmother Luz Clara. And when I saw Luz Clara, I was like, oh my God, this woman was in my dreams.
Wow.
And I finally got the nerve up to go to Luz Clara and tell her she was in my dreams. And she goes to me, that's nice, she kind of, oh, okay. But a day later, she comes back to me and she goes, I have a message for you. And I'm like, okay. And she goes, your medicine is strong, but there's an insecurity about yourself. You need to go home. I'm like, all right, go home to New York? No, go home. Go home to where? Go home to Africa. Yeah, I don't know anything about Africa. Go home to Africa where? And she says, you need to go home to Africa and you need to go on a pilgrimage. I said, oh, go on a pilgrimage with my husband. No, by yourself. You mean by myself with my girlfriends? No, by yourself. How am I going to go to Africa by myself? I don't know anything about Africa. And she goes, that's the message. And she walks away from me. And so Marcella takes us through a sweat lodge. Marcella takes us up in the top of the Andes for a vision quest. We all separate at the top of the Andes. And we basically, I'm there talking to God. I'm like, okay, God, you want me to go to Africa. If you really want me to go to Africa, you're going to have to show me a way to get to Africa. I don't know how to get there. If you show me a way to get to Africa, I will go. This is my mess. This is me and God talking at the top of the Andes in the middle of nowhere. And then Marcella bangs the drum for us to come back. And I come back earlier than some of the other women. And Marcella's talking to Lorraine, a friend of hers who's part of the retreat. And she's like, hey, my friend wants me to go to Africa with her, but I don't feel called to go to Africa. Do you want to go, Lorraine? Lorraine's like, I'm from a third world country. I don't want to go to a third world country. I'm from the Philippines. Why would I want to go to Africa? But I know Enolia wants to go. And this is 5 minutes after I have this conversation with God.
Wow.
And Marcella proceeds to say, my friend is going to Africa. And, she asked me to go. I don't feel called to go. Do you want to take my place? And I look at her and I go, yes. And I said, well, who's your friend? She goes, David Paul. And I'm like, I don't know who that is. She says, yes, you do. And I'm like, no, I don't. She says, I bet you have her music on your iPod, even though you're saying you don't. And she looks it up and she goes, there she is. And I'm like,
Wow.
oh my God. And that's how I got there. And then discovered that I had the lymphatic problem before I went. So it's like Creator created this whole incentive, knowing that I would have the self-discipline to get rid of it, the self-discipline to stay the course and want to go on this journey so bad that was the motivator for my healing. So when I
That's
talk about going through the
incredible.
birth canal, that's what I mean in terms of the whole thing. From the moment I met grandmother Luz Clara all the way until I walked away from corporate, picked up and moved across the country.
So, do
Yes,
you
they do.
mind going through your 7 principles? And if there's any like big nuggets that you want to throw in there regarding any one of the principles, feel free.
So I have the 7 principles of self-mastery. And I share that every experience I had taught me this mastery to be able to traverse and navigate life in flow. So when you take my master class, it allows you to traverse and navigate your life so that you come in flow. And they were all of the principles that we already hold within us. Most of us goes, oh yeah, the power of my word, but you don't really understand the power of your words, really. Redefining fear. How do you define fear? What does fear mean to you? What is your definition of fear? And why can't you step back and look at how you're defining fear and define it a different way so that it doesn't become your obstacle, but something that you recognize so that you can traverse? Judgment does not define me, and understanding that we all judge and judgment is always projected upon us, but how are we giving away our power in it? Why are we giving away our power in it? How do I recognize that I am, and what act is physically taking place such that I'm giving my power away? We all talk about forgiveness, but are we truly forgiving when we say, I forgive you? Forgiveness is freedom to me. How do we express it such that we really, really mean it? And that it actually changes that which is the DNA within us to release the stuff that we're holding on to that we haven't forgiven. We all have limited beliefs and we all say, get out of your own way. But do we understand that our limited belief system is actually what prevents us from moving and navigating forward? So, what is it within our limited belief system that stops us from moving forward? How do we recognize it? How do we break down those barriers? How do we identify our pain points? Where do we source our power as men and women? Do we recognize that it's different for women than it is for men? And do we recognize where to go to source that power so that we can stand in our authenticity and we can stand in our truth? And we can be honest and love what we see when we look in the mirror. And then when we recognize the culmination of all of these things to say, I am powerful. I am powerful because now I can break down any scenario that comes. And I can see and notice and traverse and navigate past the stories that are created that will prevent me from moving forward in life in a positive manner the way that I need to. So when I talk about the 7 principles of self-mastery and I talk about empower, achieve, succeed through self-mastery, the difference between my program versus many programs that you'll encounter is you will never have to look outside of yourself for what it is you need to stand in your power. Nothing that I do is outside of yourself. And this is what my indigenous elders and my indigenous teachers taught me. And how I relate it back to you is through practical experiences. I would never share anything that I hadn't experienced myself, that I hadn't learned the due diligence myself, and I hadn't encountered, that I had to navigate past the story of it myself so that my life flows effortlessly. You know, this is a great awakening and we are bombarded with so many different things. And if you could take any advice at all in terms of living in this world, I would say there's a series of things. Number one, you don't have to be on the front line. Everybody's like, what can I do? What can I do? What can I do? What you can do is you can be, right? We always don't have to fight every fight that comes our way. There are people who are suited for the fight that are supposed to fight the fight. And there are us. Recognize within yourself, what is your fight? Or we don't even have to put it in terms of the words fight. But recognize within yourself, what is it you're supposed to bring to bear in the table or bring to the table of value. For example, for me, it is helping people find that level by which they wake up, the level by which they can look at their foundation, build it stronger so that they can go on and do what it is that they believe they're supposed to do. That's the level by which I work. And I'm good at it because that's what Creator gave me to work with. And this is not coming from ego. You have to own it. And we don't own what we bring to bear. And so what you hear me is owning it. I own it. Creator works through me. I don't wake you up. What comes through me wakes you up. That's that energy connection again. The other thing that we need to look at is the fact that what we say is powerful. And it goes back to the 7 principles I did. Recognize and notice what you're saying about yourself. And if it's derogatory, stop it. Mm-hmm. Don't do it. Because it's defining, you are attracting that which you are. And you are creating your existence in what you say. And if you don't acknowledge the fact that it's meaningful, then you're going to traverse life going, why me? Why does this happen to me? Well, it happens to you because that's what you're attracting. And we all hear this and it's like, oh, you attract what you say. But do your homework on it and understand why. Understand the epigenetics that lie underneath and why it's important. Do your homework. And I'll leave it at that in terms of that particular topic. We have the opportunity to exude and be powerful. And what we need to do in order to exercise that is to be in balance with one another. To be in balance with one another, we need to put our differences aside. To put our differences aside, we have to recognize that we are in a psychological warfare that highlights nothing but our differences to make us stand apart from one another. I remember being in California and someone asking me, Grandmother Enolia, what is it that we can do with all of the things that are going on in the world? I said, come together. Come together. Know that when you come together and you meditate, when you come together and you plan, and you come together and you collaborate, and you come together and you execute something as a group, excluding the differences that would have separated you, that's the power. Because everything that we experience tells us to separate, whether they're trying to separate the family dynamics, separate the classes, separate the colors, separate. I'm this, I'm that, I'm this, da, da, da. Well, you're not this. Well, you're not that. I can't go with you. Well, you're this, you're that. If we could transcend the human dynamics of projected limitations and projected differences in one another to separate us, to keep us thinking that way, we would be a force to be reckoned with. Drunvalo Melchizedek grouped people together, and the skies were clear, and he had everyone set their intentions and said, let there be rain, and cumulus clouds formed. We have examples of what it means to be in strength as a collaborative unit, left and right, changing the weather, interrupting resonances and vibrations that are disruptive and negative. We are powerful when we come together. We just need to formulate coming together. We just need to navigate everything that would separate us. I believe that my contribution to that is creating a strong foundation so that when you stand in your truth and you state that you want to come together, that you're doing it on solid ground and you feel good about it. And there's no doubt in your mind where you want to stand, how you want to stand, that you want to stand. We emanate what we want. We formulate what we want. We bring it into creation in a human level, and then we take action.
This has been a delight. I can't thank you enough for doing this.
Your delight and what you're doing is so important because you're giving voice to that which needs to be heard, and we need to do that. We really need to do that. We're in a time where people are like, learning about so many different things and learning about so many different ways, and they're coming to the AI age and blah, 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 blah. And we need to remember this, that everything is a mirror. Technology is only mirroring back how smart we are.
Yes.
I don't care if it's, the whole one it's emanating and higher level and blah, blah, blah. Robert Grant just came out with, oh, guess what? I created the architect. Robert, guess what? That's a mirror of you. That's a mirror of the intelligence you already have, that you already have incorporated within you. I'm so glad that you're having this awakening on the outside with everybody in front of social media, but it's just you. And you're asking questions to yourself and it's mirroring back a remembrance of you.
Yes.
It's not smarter than you. Remember that, because we are the architects again.
That's right.
We're it. And so what you bring to the table complements what I bring to the table, complements what everything is out there. And we just highlighted to say we are intelligent beings and we're ready.
That's right.
We're ready to have the conversation.
That is right. And this was an amazing conversation. I will have this every day with you if you have me.
Thank you.
Thank you. This was lovely. Again, just for everyone listening, I will have all of your links in the description so that you guys can easily find her and follow her and read her books and watch her channel. It's all amazing stuff, as you now know and have seen. I cannot thank you enough for doing this. Again, thank you so, so, so much. This was lovely.
Thank you. Thank you so, so much for the opportunity.